Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about Warlords of Wyrdwood, the second book in R.J. Barker's new Forsaken trilogy. Um, so this book picks up pretty much right where Gods of the Wyrdwood left off. There was the big battle in Harn, and somehow the villagers managed to be victorious and defeat the forces of the Rye. But obviously, no imperial force like theirs would take such a loss lightly, and the villagers of Harn are now forced to flee into the Wyrdwood in a desperate bid to essentially run for their lives. Um, so there's that's happening, and even as they start to flee, the Rye are starting to mobilize to come and deal with them once and for all, and not just them, but to deal with the tree fall that's happened and to capitalize and to just exploit these vast resources. So it's a twofold reason for just coming into the Weirdwood. And the only place of safety that may be left for the villagers of Harn are maybe among the stranger and darker things that lurk in the Weirdwood. So it's a pretty compelling setup. Um, and yeah, what did I think about this book? Right off the bat, overview, this was much more like this was really entertaining compared to the first book. Like the first book, now that I have this second book for context, the first book felt like a lot of introduction, a lot of setup, a lot of laying the groundwork, um, just a lot of setting the stage essentially, and introducing us to the people and laying the foundation for the overarching plot. This book is all action. This book is just fast paced, it's intense, it never really feels like it relents, because even when there's not exactly like an action sequence per se, there's just these incredible character moments to go through. And in addition to that, there's this expansion of the world, like a deeper understanding of the world in terms of the world building that honestly, RJ Barker seems to be like he's a very creative guy. He certainly is. Um, you're immediately thrown into the thick of things essentially with this one. Um, in addition to the POVs from the previous book, we those who survived at least, we have a new POV. And what's interesting about this POV is that they're a person in an entirely new force to us, set in an entirely new part of the world. And initially, they seem like a tangent that don't really contribute anything to the story, but as these stories unfold, you see them slowly start to gravitate towards um, the existing plot threads until they eventually become intertwined in a really interesting and depressing way. And it just goes from there. Like the story just flows, and it's an interesting POV because in this one we get a soldier essentially of one of these religions who starts to question if what they're doing is right, if what they're doing is the best way to do things, and it's a person who's very smart in their approach, like they're very tactical, and it's a mindset that allows them to eventually take a very interesting path through this entire story. So there's that. We have, of course, Kahan here, who is the Kalrai um, of the currently dominant god of the North, Tarnhelgig. Um, and his story, it kind of in the first book we were introduced to him, he was like this off-putting guy. He's very unlikable, that kind of thing. In this book, we kind of see him forced to change. He like that persona that he's built up over the years, it can't work because now he has this gaggle of people who he saved and who now look to him for leadership, whether he wants it or not. And in addition to have being forced to change and forced to fill this role, whether he wants to or not, we find him start to question whether he even has the ability to continue to be what these people want, and it leads him to in an interesting avenue, an avenue that has very deep consequences for the story. Um, because obviously, like, there is a twist in this book, a pretty interesting twist. Um, it's one I think I can. I think it was sort of. I'm not sure actually. I felt like maybe it was kind of hinted at in the first book. Um, I'm no longer sure, but it was. It's an basically he's forced to evolve as a character. He's forced to change, and it's an interesting direction that his story takes. Um, and if you're a fan of his, you're in for quite a ride because boy, a lot happens with him. A lot. And then we have the other POVs in this. Like I already mentioned, the new one. We also have the POVs from the previous book, um, with Ven, who she starts to. Sorry, they start to learn more about their role in this society, and why their power works so much differently than others. Um, and then there is the third one who I can't touch without that being a spoiler. But in their story, we get an almost cosmic expansion of this story. Like so far, we've been dealing with gods and these kind of things, but in their story, we really kick things up a notch. Like this story is completely and utterly fantastical, and it kind of adds like a new layer to our understanding of this world. And initially, it just seems like this weird tangent, similar to how the new POV works. But towards the end, you kind of see how everything kind of comes together in this really strange way. Um, so there's that for the characters. In terms of the world building, I found it more compelling and more horrific than the first book was. Like the first book, we were introduced to some strange creatures and these kind of things. In this one, things take a very dark twist. It almost becomes like borderline Lovecraftian at times, dealing with some of the things. Like the Wyrdwood, even by the standards of this world, the Wyrdwood is a dark, scary place. And as the villagers flee deeper and deeper into it, in a bid to find a place where they can live free from persecution, they, like it or not, they encounter some of the things, some of the reasons why people avoid the Wyrdwood, like strange things, horrific things. Like it was fun to read about. It was honestly fun to read about. Um, so there's that. One thing I think I'm actually curious to see, though, is is the third book of this trilogy, how it wraps up everything, because this book, it's very, as much as it was like high energy, high octane, and all of that, and very interesting. It kind of there is one major thread from that was essentially hinted at the very end of the first book, that there was absolutely no movement on that thread. Like you can't see how that or at least I can't imagine how that conflict can come to a head in the third book. So that will be interesting to see. That's not to say that there's no movement on the overarching plot. Like this book, some of the events in this book, it has deep consequences going into the finale, and it's going to be a very interesting finale given what happens in this book. But like I mentioned, there was a conflict set up at the end of the first book that there was absolutely no movement towards in this book, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out. So overall, what did I think of this book? Honestly, it's a really good sequel. If you're a fan of this series, if you're a fan of the first book, like Barker ratchets it up to 110 in this one. It's everything we loved about the first book, except it's more imaginative. It's much more high octane. Like the action sequences are just brutal. The stakes are higher also. Like we've had more time with these characters. These characters they've changed. They've all become more realized beings, and in addition to that, they've grown. They've developed relationships, and they've developed attachments that it will have it increases the stakes essentially. that are up for grabs by the end of this trilogy. And this book also proves that no one is safe. Don't assume you know how this book is going to how this trilogy is going to end, because no one is safe in these books. Like, these books are quintessential. I would say they're quintessential grim. This is very much a grimdark series. It may not be grimdark in terms of like the thematic work that it deals with, but just in the sense of this world, and these characters, it's very much grimdark. So all bets are off. If you're a fan of the series, you're only going to find more about what you love about it in this book. I certainly did. And I'm even more excited to see how things wrap up in the final book now. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Warlords of the Wyrdwood. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you when I see you.